We worked together to draft, fine-tune, and amend this. We worked with countless stakeholders in the small business community, unions and human services providers across sectors, many of whom are present with us today. And together we've shown that local government can step up when federal leadership steps back.
Seattle Shield, the B&O tax plan touted by Councilmember Alexis Mercedes Rink as a huge boost for local business, was caught up in some legislative hoops this week. What does this mean for the future of this measure, which is on its way to Seattle voters? And what will it mean for those who might want to challenge it come November? Plus, with an apparent $100 million turnaround in the city's economic outlook, do we even need Seattle Shield or other tax hike measures that might be on the table? And what is next for a crop of incumbent candidates staring down what are now major gaps in their race for re-election a week after the primary? All this and more on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are mine, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, David Croman, City Hall reporter for the Seattle Times. David, finish this sentence for me. The best place to be on a hot day in the Puget Sound region is...
on a beach,
Yeah.
on a Puget Sound beach.
Yep. I like that. I also would have accepted Coleman Pool in West Seattle, one of the few outdoor pools in the city. They actually pump in water from Puget Sound, so you get some extra beach bonus points there if you're actually in that pool. But that's good. I love it. Thank you, David, for being with me as we get through a hot week here in the middle of August. Also want to thank our background noise sponsor, City Grind Espresso on the first floor of City Hall. Thanks to all the patrons for the show. Big shout out to Alexandra, who just jumped on board. Thank you for your support out there. If you want to be cool like Alexandra, become a podcast patron, please. Support levels start at $5 a month. You get access to patrons first content. We got some coming your way soon. You can even get your own decal. Very cool here. We answer your questions on the show. Seattle News, Views, and Brews at gmail.com. Can't wait to have you aboard. Find Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. Also find this podcast on Converge Media. The video version is on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. All right, let's go with Right Here, Right Now. Well, David, I think this is a relatively small issue, but I wanted to take a closer look at this. So Seattle Shield, we've been talking about this. This is a restructuring of the business and occupation tax. Small businesses would pay little to no B&O tax. Larger businesses would pay more. Could be an $80 to $90 million windfall for the city. So the council approved this proposal to be sent to voters last week. But then this week, the council has to vote on this again because there was an error, a scrivener's error, the ordinance says. There was an incorrect date for when the second phase of the tax rate would go into effect. I'm way in the weeds here, but the vote this week will fix that. I just want to look at this, David, because this doesn't happen often, especially with big pieces of legislation. Before I get to anything, though, when was the last time you heard the word scrivener, which is an old-timey word for clerk? Gentle listeners out there, make sure you know that. For me, it was reading Herman Melville's short story, Bartleby the Scrivener, in high school. David, what do you got?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever typed out the word scrivener in my life or written the word scrivener in my life.
It's a good one. Yeah,
doesn't cross my brain. Although I'll add it to my lexicon here.
Yeah, scriven that on in there. Bartleby, Bartleby, humanity. Please read the short story. It's all a good look at a different time in our lives here. I did want to look at this clerical error or scrivener's error because critics of this bill, who said this was a rushed piece of legislation, kind of might now have some ammo to work with for the November election, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I don't entirely know because the deadline to pass this was a week ago because they had to pass it before the primary. I don't know. Maybe this is a question for you. I don't know if that screws things up at all because do you know the answer to that?
Not my understanding. No, apparently this is what's going to solve it because it's just a clerical error, not something that was intentional. I believe this should still be able to go through. But again, these are all good questions to ask.
So, I mean, does this make the difference? Does the fact that there's a scrivener's error in here make the difference in November when it's voted on? Probably not. But it does lend some, I guess, evidence to the argument from a number of council members who all, by the way, voted for it in the end, that this is a rushed process. The counter argument has been, well, it's going to get months of debate before it actually shows up to voters and voters can decide on it. But sure, yeah, I think you could point to this as an example of perhaps what happens when you're rushing something through. The Dan Strauss and Alexis Mercedes Rank point out it had two committee meetings and a final vote, which is fairly typical. And I can think
Yep.
of pieces of legislation that other council members have passed that have moved much more quickly than this.
Yeah. Yeah.
The bill recently to ban the use of algorithmic rent
Oh,
setting,
right.
that was like a week.
Yep.
And so of course, when certain council members are skeptical of a bill, that bill becomes rushed.
Yeah.
I remember Dan Strauss talking about the Soto housing bill as being rushed, and
Oh,
how we
yeah.
need to take our time with this. It's a great way to try and slow something down that is inevitably going to pass.
Yeah.
But conveniently, whenever your pet project comes up, it's all gets perfect due process.
Yeah.
And
Let's get this thing cooking. Right.
yeah, so it. I understand the complaint, but there's not a lot of consistency, let's say, on the council of when something is rushed or when something is is
Yeah.
properly vetted.
Yeah, let me take it one step further, and I don't know. I'm just really thinking forward on this, because let's say voters in Seattle approve this tax, as they have approved countless others in the past, as we've talked about. Does this clerical error? I see this as something that might be the target of a lawsuit in the future if voters pass it. And I just wonder if you can look that far ahead. Is this something that I don't know, might lend itself even to a legal case to challenge something like this if, again, voters pass it?
Yeah, I'm not smart enough to know if the
Yeah.
scrivener's error will be the basis for that lawsuit, but
Right.
I expect it'll probably get challenged anyway, just
Mm-hmm.
because this sort of has the trappings of an initiative in some ways, even though there's no
Yeah.
signature gathering, but it's got the
Right.
same feel. And um, so, I would say almost all of almost all ballot measures that are placed as a sort of question before voters, either that were put on there by legislative bodies or put on there by signature gatherers,
Mm-hmm.
tend to face some kind of lawsuit.
Oh, yeah.
Usually that revolves around whether or not it violates the single subject rule. I don't know. It strikes me that this one probably doesn't, but
Yeah.
we know the chamber really doesn't like this
Oh, yeah.
this proposal at all, and the Downtown Seattle Association really doesn't like it at all. And so if they want to get creative and find a legal challenge, I have faith they probably will.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just happy we got to say Scrivener a half
Yeah.
dozen times here for
I
the
know.
show. So rolling with this, sticking with the tax and revenue topic, when the council passed Seattle Shield last week, they also got an update on the economic forecast. What was now about 240 million is now apparently 150 million. David, you reported on this, and I'm really glad you brought this forward, because I feel like this is at least as big a headline as the passage of Seattle Shield for voters to decide on here. First off, can you give us an understanding of why that number changed? What happened here? Because going from 240 to 150 feels like a pretty big swing.
Yeah, I mean the real reason is basically how the city's analysts perceive the economy. When they gave the 240 estimate, their perception was that, because every time that there is a forecast or a planning, here's how you can plan your budget sort of meeting, they have three options. They can go with the most optimistic, the quote baseline option, and the pessimistic.
Right.
And they almost always go with the baseline option, which is usually kind of some average, basically, of what Moody's and S&P have put out there for their reads on the economy. In the spring, they actually adopted the pessimistic version.
That's right.
Based in their assumption that tariffs would have a more kind of immediate suppression of the economy, plus some other kind of just big question marks about the economy. So far, those haven't really shown up in the way that they were anticipating. And so the big change is really that they have come to have a slightly rosier view of the economy. And so they are now recommending the quote baseline option. So
okay.
fundamentally, as far as like dollars into the city, not that much has changed. It's just that they are no longer expecting the worst case version of the economy to come into pass. Now, I will say, though, that the corollary to that is, we still get a look at what the optimistic baseline and pessimistic options are. And so what we saw in this presentation is the baseline option is much improved from the pessimistic one, but the new pessimistic outlook is actually even more pessimistic than the previous one. So,
oh boy, yeah.
If that one does end up coming to pass, then the city is actually in significantly worse shape than it was before. And I think the temper on this improved outlook is, the analysts have said, this could change in a heartbeat. We could change this.
Right.
We could revise this downward next time. And so their recommendation was, okay, right now we think the baseline option is probably the best way to go,
Hmm.
but you should probably budget in a way that anticipates we could change that. And so the headline is good, but
Yeah.
on a whole, I would say the economic outlook is not altogether that much better.
Fair. I was trying to go down this path though, because we are seeing, this change in this outlook, at least in terms of what the forecasters are saying. And it makes me think about, do we need Seattle Shield? And if you want to look at it this way, foreshadowing our upcoming discussion here on the podcast about election results, could this outlook mean that local leaders who are running for re-election might cool off on this push for this sales tax hike we've talked about to boost public safety? Because I've talked to a couple of people at City Hall, and they're saying this discussion, which Council President Nelson was really pushing a couple of weeks ago. She brought up this plan to have more dollars into treatment, and she was really banking on this idea of adding this 0.1% sales tax. It doesn't seem like it's getting a lot of traction right now. Of course, it's a regressive tax. It's not a progressive priority, and the progressives were pretty loud in the primary. How do you look at the future of that? The state approved allowance for cities to add this 0.1% sales tax for public safety. Do you think it's going to happen? Does the election change that? Work in that economic outlook too? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. My guess is it would still happen just
Mm,
because it's not often that cities in Washington get unilateral authority to raise more money for a priority. And uh, you know, public safety is why a lot of this council is sitting there. And, we can get into our next discussion about how potent that is as an
yeah,
electoral issue anymore.
yeah,
But um, I think given the opportunity to raise more money for cops and treatment for fentanyl, I would be surprised if City Hall did not take it.
yeah,
Um, that said, like you said, the economic outlook is slightly improved, and so maybe that does kind of complicate the equation a little bit.
yeah.
But my expectation is that the mayor will probably include that sales tax in his budget proposal.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what happens there. That's going to be an important debate over the next couple of weeks here. All right. Well, thanks a lot for that, David. Coming up, a week after the primary election, the smoke has cleared, but the numbers are looking more and more like a dumpster fire for several Seattle incumbents. We're going to break down what's happening on. Now, hear this. Well, catching up on primary election results, the call for change we saw last week has only grown louder for incumbents fighting for their political lives. City Attorney Ann Davison is way behind in her race, 20 plus points now with Erica Evans. The same goes for Council President Sarah Nelson, more than 20 points behind Dion Foster. Mayor Bruce Harrell is now just about 10 points behind in his race with Katie Wilson. And as he told King 5, he has a battle ahead in November.
Well, we sort of predicted this. We know all along these are tough races. There's really no easy mayor races, and so we will move to the general, and we have to tell our story. And the data sort of speaks for itself in terms of what we're doing in Seattle. But people want some change. They want to see the energy. They want to know we're on the right trajectory. And while I'm running the city, it's sort of hard to. I say we don't take victory laps. So we'll keep doing the work and be victorious in November.
David, you were following all these races I mentioned very closely here and some others as well. Was the mayor's race the most surprising, or what jumped out at you from the primary results and where we are now a week later?
Yeah, I think the mayor's race was the most surprising, just because, I mean, for a lot of reasons. I would say that for most of this year, the mayor had kind of an air of inevitability about him,
Yeah.
particularly at the beginning of 2025. He was getting labor Oscars, so he was getting a ton of support from labor unions, which
Yeah.
he had not had in his last run. He was getting endorsements from people like Representative Pramila Jayapal.
Right.
And frankly, the things that he ran on, which are, hiring more cops,
Yeah.
cleaning up, bringing down crime, cleaning up streets, keeping encampments out of public view. It's hard to argue that those things aren't happening. You can argue about the degree to which they're happening, but police department is hiring more cops. Crime has come down. I would say, places like Pioneer Square do see perhaps fewer encampments. And so
Yeah.
I think all of that combined kind of gave the sense that, Harrell was going to glide to reelection. But, I think we're still kind of parsing through what exactly happened. But it just is such a volatile political moment, particularly if you're in office now. And I think that there is a sense that voters want some kind of narrative for where the city's going, what's going to happen next. I do think that public safety is perhaps not as big of on as much the top issue that it was in 2021. I think maybe affordability is overtaking that, and I think Harrell perhaps fell victim to being an incumbent in a really difficult time to be an incumbent, because he has to simultaneously acknowledge people's frustration with the current state of things while also telling them that the last 4 years have been great.
Right.
And that's sort of a discordant thing to argue. And then he had a candidate in Katie Wilson who was delivering a pretty effective narrative that she understood your frustration about how expensive things are and would do something about it. And I don't know that we've heard that as much with Harrell. And so, yes, that was a big surprise to me. Nelson and Davison, I was not particularly surprised that they would be down. I was surprised by how much they're down.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually probably worth pointing out that if you take their races at a baseline, Harrell actually overperformed them by quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Sure.
I think is worth there is something happening there, and I haven't exactly parsed what, but I just think on a whole, this city hall was elected on specifically public safety and public disorder, and that was really their whole issue. And I think that maybe that people are starting to think about other things beyond that.
Yeah, right.
And are not satisfied with how the city hall has taken on questions of affordability.
Yeah.
This city council in particular has taken up issues around, gig work and the minimum wage, and issues that were never discussed in last election. And I think that probably derailed things a little bit, changed the conversation to a place that is more friendly to progressives.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot to work through here, but when all is said and done, it was about worst case scenario if you're a city hall incumbent not named Alexis Mercedes Rank.
Right. She cleaned up about 78% of the vote for her. And I really kind of had that sense too, that progressive voters who might be feeling hamstrung at the national level are really turning their attention for local seats. I think you could make that jump too. But looking ahead here, and I know each race is different, but how do incumbents make up ground here? Because it seemed like even when Bruce Harrell, not too long ago, was going big with a progressive tax measure like Seattle Shield, right next to Alexis Mercedes Rink at the press conference there, he's supporting this thing. Is it that he didn't get the recognition for it from this serious progressive voter base, or how do you look at that? Because I'm definitely seeing candidates like Harrell swing a little bit towards the left, and in expectation of what was going to happen here in the primary.
Yeah, the problem for Harrell is he's just been around for so long.
Yeah.
People, when you look at polling, people know Bruce Harrell. I think it was only 8% of respondents had never heard of Bruce Harrell. And so, if you're that well known, it's kind of hard to redefine yourself in such a short period of time. And I think the reputation that Harrell has is, somebody who's close to Harrell and works for Harrell and likes Harrell and wants him to be reelected described him to me as a majoritarian, which I actually thought was a fairly apt description, which is he's a guy who I think he does try and position himself at the center of Seattle politics, which makes him difficult to define in a lot of ways. He's not Sarah Nelson. He's not kind of an ideological centrist.
Yes.
He's certainly not Shama Sawan or anything like that. He has a way of sort of trying to be in the middle of things. And we saw that when he was on council. He would often be the last and even deciding vote on measures.
Yes.
And I think that is his reputation, is that he is not like a ideological. He's not as far as city hall politicians go, he's far from the most ideological. And I just think perhaps right now the voters' desire is they want somebody who's a little more ideological. They want somebody who is a counter to something like Donald Trump, which is a specific direction, because anybody left of center right now who does not support Donald Trump is floundering. There is just not a lot of cohesiveness as far as an opposition goes. And I think people are looking for elected leaders that have kind of specific ideological directions, even if you totally disagree with that direction or doubt its effectiveness. I think that's just appealing, and why we're seeing, Mamdani or something do as well, is they're offering a specific direction and a specific narrative that people can cling to. And that's just never really been Harrell's style. He's been much more kind of community, individual project oriented
Yep.
rather than I'm going to be your leader into the future.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting to see how this one's going to pan out too. A lot still ahead. Thank you for that, David. I did want to make a quick note on other council activity this week. A few things are getting jammed in before the council's 2-week summer break, which kicks in on Monday of next week. They're back in business right after Labor Day. One of the issues, a special meeting called for the Health and Human Services. This is going on Wednesday, the committee there. It includes a measure I have my eye on, this idea to revise the multifamily tax exemption, the MFTE program. We've talked about it on the podcast before. This is the program that gives tax breaks to developers who create affordable housing units. Back in 2019, MFTE was modified, extended, but times have really changed then in the real estate world. It's a lot more expensive to build, and homes are more expensive to purchase too. So the council is reducing this fee to apply for this exemption from $10,000 to a base fee of $2,000 plus $200 per unit, not to exceed 10 grand there. So the hope is to get more builders, smaller builders perhaps, to apply for this program. David, I kind of went over that rough math here. I guess my big question is this going to work? Is this going to be enough to entice builders to get involved with this program?
Yeah, I mean, I think affordable multifamily housing is kind of the most difficult right now. And it's the hardest to make pencil. There are a lot of questions about MFTE and whether that's doing that. And, frankly, I don't know. I mean, I think this is kind of why the social housing developer exists, is to build this kind of housing, because it just has not penciled
right
on the market front. But
it's too expensive for builders to do it, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Because to charge the rates, they can fit a bunch of the most profitable thing to build right now is studios, because you can fit a bunch of them into a building and charge not that much less than you would for a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom.
Yep.
And there's a lot of reasons we could get into it, but it's just not quite as profitable to build multifamily housing. And so the tax exemption is something, but I get the sense that it isn't enough necessarily to bring on as many as the city wants. So certainly this is one way. I question if the goal is, if you are acknowledging that this permitting fee is a barrier, well, I don't entirely understand why keep the 2,000.
Yeah, right.
If you're dropping it 8,000, why not just drop it entirely?
Yeah,
that's just a question that I have. But
no, it's a good one. And I was looking at some of the city data here. Some of these MFTE renters, basically the people who are in these units here, they're spending about 85% of them, as of a couple years ago, were considered housing cost burden, meaning they spend over 30% of their income on housing. So these units out there that are supposed to be affordable are not. This MFTE rent is set at a higher percentage of the area median income, and we've got a lot of households in trouble here. I guess I'm looking at that bottom line too. This program, maybe it needs to be modified to hit that bottom line. And I see what they're doing with helping developers, but I guess you could help renters out here too, because they're feeling the pinch as well.
Yeah, right. And at some point there was a discussion of lowering the maximum AMI.
Yep.
Then that, of course, though, it comes with the concerns that if you do that, are you going to have to evict people who are making over that threshold who live there now? And of course, that's tricky. But I don't know what that does for the landlords who are still trying to make a profit on this. Again, the question of how you make multifamily housing in Seattle affordable, if we had a good answer to that, then Bruce Harrell would probably be winning a second term.
Yeah. Good point. I always like getting into these, though, with you. Sometimes we ask more questions than we answer, but this is something that the council is definitely wrestling with this week. It's in the Health and Human Services, or Housing and Human Services Committee there. Deborah Juarez overseeing that, and we'll see what happens there next. All right, well, coming up, strap on your shoes. You're about to take a walk in. Wait for it. The country's most walkable city. Is that you, Seattle? Some thoughts coming up here on What's Next. David, I couldn't help but notice a number of political figures, Mayor Harrell, Councilmember Saka among them, celebrating a recent review from Travel and Leisure that indicates Seattle is the most walkable city in the country. I saw a few different social media posts about this. The data comes from a company called Fit Flops, which happens to create fashionable sandals for men and women. So take that for what it is. The main thrust of the study showed that, hey, the waterfront, Pike Place, the Space Needle, are all within 1.5 miles of each other, and that equals walkable. David, are you buying this? Is Seattle the most walkable city? What do you think about that?
No.
Okay.
I don't
Tell
think
me
it
why.
is. Because, I mean, because there's New York,
Right.
I mean,
Because New York, yeah.
because of New York, or it is not. There are just still huge parts of Seattle that you have to get in your car and drive to go even get a drink.
Yeah.
I lived in Portland. Portland's far more walkable than Seattle because you have neighborhood bars in every neighborhood.
Okay.
You don't have that in Seattle. So,
All right. So you're saying like bars that are distant, that are close to you.
yeah.
That's the Kroman,
Yeah, exactly.
index.
Can
Yeah,
I
right.
walk to a bar is my question of how walkable it is. And for a lot of Seattle, the answer is no. And so
Yeah.
therefore, there's no way it's the most walkable. That said, it is a lovely city to take a walk in from an aesthetic
Yeah.
point of view. You can see a lot of very beautiful things by not walking very much. So from that perspective, yes,
Yeah.
Seattle is a great place to walk around. So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is it depends on what you're looking for on your walk. If you're looking for nice views, then yeah, Seattle is one of the most walkable. If you're looking for a place to get a drink or to buy groceries or eat a burger, then no, it's not.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so it's not how comfortable you feel in your pair of fit flops. That's an important part of this too. And
No,
I guess
it's also there's also big hills. I don't know.
that's what I'm saying, because if I wanted to get from downtown to Capitol Hill, for example, I mean, we're talking about a couple 100 feet elevation there. I'm not saying it can't be done and you can't walk that way, but it's not like there's escalators going up. That part of it kind of confuses me here too.
No, yeah. I love walking around Seattle.
Yeah, me too.
But no, I don't think it's the most walkable.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we'll see what everyone else thinks. Get out there for a walk, folks. If you want to head to, well, shoot, the waterfront, heading up to Pike Place, heading up to the Space Needle, that walk is beautiful, and I'm glad millions of people are going to be taking that this summer as the waterfront reopens. We do need to wrap up here, David. I wanted to talk about this with you. Since we last met up for a podcast, the Mariners are 9-1, best record in the majors over that span. They made a big trade deal for Eugenio Suarez. Things are looking pretty up. Is our podcast cursed? What do you think? I just wanted to put it that way.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm still convinced the Mariners are cursed. So
no. Well, don't do that.
Well, I saw a graphic today that said they had a 94% chance of making the playoffs.
Oh, I don't want to see that. Right.
Which to me is as good as 100%. That just dooms them to not making the playoffs.
Right.
So
you read about that at jinx.com.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Until I'm sitting on my couch watching the Mariners in a playoff game, I will not believe that they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, but you've seen it. I mean, ever since that trade deadline, it looks like
it's been great.
Some new energy. What are you seeing out of these guys?
It's the most fun team that I think they've had since, gosh, I don't remember. I mean, because even in 22 when they went to the playoffs, it was still a kind of frustrating team, and the lineup was not that deep. You know, like the pitching was really good. This is the first time. I mean, at the end of the day, when you watch baseball, it's the most fun to watch your team hit well.
Yep.
It's great to watch good pitching, but it's not as fun as watching good hitting.
Yep.
And so now they have a lot of good hitters, and so it's fun to watch. It's the most fun I've had watching the Mariners, honestly, probably since like 2001.
Yeah, no, it's turned. And the thing that's going to turn it for me is to actually see Josh Naylor at first base crack a smile once.
I know.
I would love. What is that? We've got like resting Josh Naylor face over there. But
I appreciate that. They've got Julio and they've got Randy and
they could do the smiling for me.
Robles and they've got all these really big personalities, and you need to have a couple grumps on the field.
I love it. Well, that's great. And David, we are taking a break anyway. The next time you hear me and David will be after Labor Day when the city council is back on the job, but some special Patrons First podcast action is coming your way next week. David, thank you as always. Stay tuned, everybody. And thanks to everyone who is listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Thanks again to patrons who support the show. Alexandra, this one's for you. Really appreciate the support there. If you want to be a patron, go for it. Please consider a pledge of $5 a month or more on Patreon to be a patron. You can hear this podcast on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. We are there. Thanks for watching on Converge Media, too. We will see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2025.